Professor Niebuhr has been researching speech melody for over 20 years and is considered as a specialist in the forms and functions of speech prosody in general and the acoustic of charisma in particular. He is the author of hundreds of journal papers and conference proceedings with over 3,500 citations and an associate editor of the International Journal Phonetica, as well as the Journal of the International Phonetic Association. In 2019, the company AllGoodSpeakers ApS was launched as part of a patent process for acoustic voice profiling, in which Professor Niebuhr is CEO, co-founder, and the inventor of the patent acoustic voice profiling. This initiative has become the first 21st century rhetoric company. And last, for the sake of disclosure, I have the honor of co-authoring publications with Oliver, and we are longtime friends. Please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Barak, and thanks also for having me. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. I hope I will say something inspiring about charismatic voices and what voice can do to both to leadership and to artificial intelligence. And I've already seen this morning in the first talk of Professor Ben Israel that I'm at a good spot here because the reason that I'm here and what I'm basically saying today was basically driven by entrepreneurship. And therefore also the first part of my talk, I will give you 4 different little perspectives on voice and charisma, is called the mission All Good Speakers. And if you give ChatGPT the task to picture me in a kind of jury based on the photos that are on the internet, this is basically what comes out. Thanks a lot. I think I have a bit too many teeth in my mouth, but the rest I think is relatively okay. The story behind this is that I'm an acoustic engineer / phonetician / linguist somehow, and when I came to the University of Southern Denmark, I was asked whether I can help teaching Danish engineers public speaking and presentation skills, because when they are looking for funding for their ideas, especially in international contests, they are not very likely to win. That sounds a little boring. And between us, yes, they sometimes do. But engineers in general have the kind of habit of sounding perhaps a little bit under-passionate, let's say. And when I said, yes, okay, I can basically do that, and I'm now giving a course for about 7 years already to Danish business engineers and to climate change engineers at SDU. But what I started with is that I went to Amazon and I bought myself some books about rhetorics, public speaking, charisma, how to be great on stage, all the things that basically Mark did when he was here on stage, because there is a reason why US speakers always stand out at conferences and that stuff, because they actually invest into that. Not just people like Mark himself, but basically the whole society has a bit of a public speaking culture. And this is what we sometimes lack in Europe and in Denmark, perhaps even in particular. So you basically buy some books and you find that the books say, yeah, the voice is super important and you have to be careful with the kind of vocal performances. And then when it comes to voices, the chapter on voices are perhaps 10 pages, perhaps even less, and sometimes it is not even directly on the voice, but something like, well, if you change your breathing, then your voice might do this and that. And then you find statements like, you have to sound fluid, you have to be something like a variable rhythm and intonation, you have to have a clear voice, sometimes perhaps also something like a warm voice, or you have to sound vivid, and when you are an acoustic engineer and phonetician, you actually wonder, what is this supposed to be, and how should I teach these to my engineering students? That was the kind of challenge that I started off with about 10 years ago. And then you actually end up even worse, because more often than not, if you buy more than just one book, books tend to contradict themselves. So you buy the first book of Sabine Volkmann, it tells you pauses should be long, because long pauses have got a structuring function. Breathing, yes, but please through the mouth, because through the nose it can be super noisy at times, and you should not change your pitch, and fluent speaking is good. Next book, Olivia Fox-Cobain, pauses should be short, because short pauses make you sound more fluent. And of course, the nose breathing is what you should do, because it somehow manages kind of belly breathing that you would like to have. You should try hard to change your pitch level, yes, but to make it lower, and speaking slower is better. Next book, by Kurt Mortensen, says pauses should be both long and short, depends a bit on what you do. You should, yes, change your pitch level, but actually make it higher pitched and not lower pitched. And occasional disfluencies are actually super fine. And speak faster, please, and not slower. So you have 3 different books, 3 different recommendations. And what I like most is the second last page of this book tells you, if you don't like how you sound, take a deep breath and find a solution. Where I thought, okay, I've now spent about $20 for a person telling me, if it doesn't work, you will figure it out somehow. But I don't want to do any coaching bashing here, because it took us 7 years to find out that they are all right. They are all correct. It depends on the context, on the channel, on the gender. All of these recommendations make sense. You just cannot generalize from the individual context, experience, gender to the whole public. This is where the problems come in. But this was about 10 years ago the starting point when I had promised to my university, as a newcomer, please make a course for public speaking for Danish engineers. So that was a bit of a challenge at those days. We had to do something on our own. This was basically the kind of conclusion from it. And of course, there have been starting points. There have been a few papers on let's say, scientific acoustic papers about what are the acoustic fingerprints of a charismatic, meaning persuasive, passionate voice on stage, but there were only about 2 or 3 papers of them. So we actually, the first thing that we did is we went all over the world, virtually, of course, into 16 different countries, basically made surveys, asked the people who are good speakers, who are not so good speakers, who do you like to listen to, and maybe not so much. And then we looked for the overlaps, acoustic overlaps between those people that people said, yeah, he or she is actually good, or maybe not so much. And this gave us an idea of the kind of acoustic parameters that you have to control to make voices more or less charismatic, persuasive, convincing, basically. And then we went into the lab. This is not AI, actually. It is handcrafted work. We have went into the lab and made stepwise manipulations of these. We made things stepwise faster, stepwise slower, higher pitched, lower pitched, more narrow in pitch range and a bit more wide, longer pauses, shorter pauses, blah, blah, blah. Even basically played parameters off against each other to see which one is basically the more powerful. And all of that in the range of about 2 years. We have collected about more than 500,000 listener ratings to basically build a system that would do the job. This is now what we can do for you. If you want, you can also try it out. You can give us a speech sample. It can be anything as long as you think it is somehow what you would do on stage, basically. At least 40 seconds, please. And then we're going to break it up into up to 16 different acoustic parameters that we know play a role for your impact on stage. And then we can give you a score. Actually, the score wasn't even our intention, but our users said, we want to have a score. So how good are we now? What is the kind of number that you would put on our performance? And therefore, we've also developed a score. But actually, this is the kind of main thing, because the point is that we have now approximately 4,000 users in our database. I will also get a slide on this soon. And we haven't come across anybody, not a single person, who is bad in all respects. People always have their strengths, and they always have their kind of weaknesses, and we can deliberately and very specifically work on people's weaknesses, trying to keep the strengths as they are. This is basically what we do with this system, and what we now also use, not just for Danish engineers, actually. It has become so much widespread that we do it not really across the globe, but definitely internationally. And this has been also the basis for basically founding our little startup company, which is not so little anymore, but we are far from being something like a unicorn. But anyways, we have got a number of people working on this. We are developing hardware and software solutions, doing also our own services, but mainly help other coaches, help other trainers getting the hardware, the software they need to train others in public speaking skills. And here's the statistics. We have started in 2018 already, so a few months before the company was officially founded. And these are the number of recordings in our database. So it's actually constantly growing in these days by about 1,000 entries per year, hopefully a bit more. And this is perhaps in terms of people's real speeches, so of the speeches of basically you and me out there talking like I'm doing it here now on stage, perhaps the largest annotated database of speeches worldwide. And we are doing this for the Western Germanic languages because our system works best for these languages because we have trained it, or we have basically done the experiments in or for the Western Germanic languages. If we go into Scandinavian languages, it is still okay. If we go to the kind of Roman languages, Spanish, French, not so nice. If we go to Asian languages, forget it, it doesn't work. But actually, and for Hebrew, it works relatively well. We have tested this, Vered and I. And our score proves quite precise and quite informative, actually. We actually didn't really want to get there, but basically other people have taken our score and did something with it. For example, what they found is this is a PhD thesis from New York University, that our score is in terms of the correlation with psychopathy similarly precise as parts of a clinical questionnaire. And we can, in terms of stock market, even predict the kind of dividend payout of, or we can explain, let's say, the dividend payout of some companies in the Dow Jones and German DAX 40 index. We can also give you a quite precise assessment of how your machine voice sounds, whether it sounds approachable or unfriendly or even arrogant. My own car navigation system sounds pretty arrogant, I must say. And it's so easy to change it, but for some reasons, the engineers are not there yet, I think. Anyways, so this is the first mission that I wanted to tell you about. The first kind of story is that my background is in all of the voice can say and can do between the lines. Yes, I've done this for more than 25 years now, doing the kind of research on what do we actually say unconsciously between the lines, between the words. It doesn't make a difference, right? If I say hello, or hello, or hello, right? The same word, different intonations, and it does make a difference. And this is what I'm doing and what has led now to this acoustic voice profiling. What I would like to do now is to build the bridge to something like leadership. Transactional leaders focus on something like rewards, efforts, and they intervene when these kind of goals and standards are not met. And we have to differentiate this from transformational leaders who inspire and motivate followers to exceed expectations. This is something that probably, if you have had a course in leadership, know quite well. And there are these 4 cornerstones of transformational leadership. This is the idealized influence, inspiration and motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. And when it comes to voices, when it comes to vocal leadership, most of the associations go with the idealized influence. So this is the one that is most closely tied to voices and charismatic leadership, and what is basically commonly understood as charisma. So charismatic leaders act as role models their presence and communication style, and the emotional resonance is establish credibility and commitment, yes, and they go beyond formal authority. And what I would like to make the point is that it is actually a lot more what the voice can do in leadership. So it is not just something like a nice-to-have trait, but a communicative force that enables leaders to share their specific vision. And when leaders speak with charisma, they also activate mechanisms that are not just the first cornerstone that I said, but they also link to inspirational motivation and intellectual stimulation. So, and in this sense, charisma is not separate from leadership. It is actually very much the basis of the leadership, and we are talking here in terms of acoustic and emotional aspects of the voice, of course, as well. I will give you two examples, one on the motivation and one on the intellectual stimulation. So this is basically what I would like you to understand in terms of that it's not just this arrow here that plays a role, but basically all of the things are connected to charismatic speakers. And this is how the voice looks like if you look at it like a researcher, and then this is how you deal with, you have the waveform, spectrogram, and other kinds of annotations. So this is what I'm talking about today. Here's an example from Professor Antonakis, Lausanne University in Switzerland. What they did, and they actually did this already 10 years before, the paper was just published 10 years after, they made an experiment with basically 3 groups of people, and they have recruited people to stuff envelopes for charity reason. So people had to put in letters into envelopes so that these can be sent to recipients. And what they did is they've basically hired an agency for that reason. In the baseline condition, the agency gave the normal introductory instruction to their workers. In the test 1 condition, everybody who was hired got a bonus for exceeding the minimum requirements. So if I stuff more envelopes, I get more paid. This was the idea. And in the test 2 conditions, there was no bonuses, but there have actually been charismatic instructions. So the workers got a charismatic instruction instead of paid bonuses. And what they found is that both test conditions outperformed the baseline condition. People put more things into envelopes and have been more efficient in doing this, actually. About 17% more output in the 2 test conditions, and the 2 test conditions have been exactly statistically indistinguishable. So basically, it doesn't matter if I pay people more or give them a more charismatic instructions, which in the terms of Antonakis and colleagues is a crazy result that is not well explained by current economic theory, because they got increased performance basically for free. And they have done a similar experiment also where they did it in a laboratory task where the participants were exposed to charismatic motivational speeches before playing a repeated public good game. And here also the result was that under the condition of charismatic elements in the speech, that the contributions increased by about 19%, which can be significant. Every percentage basically counts in these contexts. And 90% is a significant, also societally significant increase. The other example is what you probably have already heard. It is called the Egg Drop Challenge, and now we are at the intellectual stimulation. And there was a creativity workshop, or actually many groups of creativity workshops. And the Egg Drop Challenge means that you get an egg and you get many little materials, and you have to wrap the egg in a way that you can let it fall from some height and it should not break. Okay, so you basically have to somehow make it happen that you put the egg in such a protection that if you let it fall, it stays intact. And they have done this workshop in the same room, under more or less the same conditions, the same type of day, multiple times, and they have pre-recorded the workshop moderation by the same speaker, with a trained speaker, once in a charismatic moderation style and once in a normal information-oriented, matter-of-fact speaking style. And what is important is that you can see it here. These were basically the times on this 1 hour time scale when the moderation came in, and it was 5.5 minutes in total within the 60 the 60 minutes of the speech. And what they found is that these 5.5 minutes of a difference in moderation made a significant difference to how the workshop or to the workshops went. We see a big difference in people's speaking tempo, so people talk faster, people also talk more and paused less. There was more interaction within the workshop teams when the moderation was charismatic. This was one of the results. Then secondly, you are more likely to have a good outcome. This was for the regular. Yes, you have quite high outcomes in terms of the number of ideas, but you also have something like lower outcomes. And here you basically all have consistent outcomes. So the risk of ending with something like a low idea output is reduced with a charismatic moderation, and also the innovation value of the ideas when being rated by an expert panel was higher. And finally, even the self-assessment of the people in the workshop increased under a charismatic moderation. People found themselves to be more capable, more intelligent, more well-mannered, reflective, sincere, and unconventional with these 5.5 minutes change in the course of the workshop. So, in summary, in the words of Antonakis, charisma is a values-based, symbolic, and emotion-laden leader signaling. Symbolic basically means that you are using linguistic means to get it across. And signaling, which almost hides here at the end, is one of the most important terms because it says that charisma is not something that we have, it is something that we do. It's something that we can, measure, that we can improve, that we can learn and test. Okay, part 3, leadership and vocal performance is what I would like to talk about next. So now that we have seen that charisma and leadership are somehow connected, and we have already gotten a bit of an impression of what the voice can potentially do, here are some examples that I would like to point out. A study has been published for the TechCrunch startup fairs that are every year. And what these researchers have done is they have, over the course of 5 years, looked at 175 investor pitches on stage, and they have tried to predict, or basically to explain from the investors' vocal performances, their pitch levels, pitch range, pausing behavior, loudness, tempo, voice quality, all of that stuff. Can we explain or can we statistically model whether or not these people get funding? And in the end, they were actually capable of doing, with a precision of 76.1%, were able to split by terms of the vocal behavior, those that get funded from those that do not. And with a bit of a lower accuracy, even how much money flows from the investor into the startup. Less than $100,000, more than $100,000, $500,000, $1 million, or even more. So the way you talk on stage makes or has a big saying in whether you get funding or not for your startup. And when I'm telling this, especially in Denmark, Danes tend to say, yeah, only in America. Come on, this is the US, different different country, different story. This will not happen here. And we haven't tested it for Denmark, to be honest, but I have a good colleague also at Cologne University, and we have tested this for the biggest German startup contest, which is the so-called Rhineland pitch. And because of the times during the COVID crisis, all of these things were nicely online, and we can extract all of the audio sound files with a high acoustic quality. So we basically did the same thing for the Rhineland pitch over the course of 2 years and found a similar thing. Not exactly the same prediction accuracy, but something like 66.7% accuracy. So basically what we did is that these are the kind of rankings of the finalists by both the jury and the audience, and these are our predicted rankings. And as you can see, especially for the winners, we have done relatively well. For the losers, not so much, but still well above chance level, actually, significantly above chance level. And the interesting thing is that these are more like competence cues in your voice, your tempo, your pausing, your loudness. So if you sound competent, you are most likely not to lose the contest. But this is made by intonation. So if you have a good vocal viability, if you have a lively intonation, you are more likely to win, actually. So these are the differences also that have been found here. And another thing, because Danes love robots, and we have robots now basically being everywhere in banks, in retirement homes, at schools, even because the robots are very tolerant and they have a super patience. So they are actually very, very patient people to talk to. And what we did is we have taken, let's say, the vocal fingerprints of Steve Jobs and of Mark Zuckerberg, because about 15 years ago there was a big thing in the press that if you are on stage, better be Steve Jobs, please don't be Mark Zuckerberg. So we have basically taken this as a starting point, and we took the vocal profile, so only their tempo, their pausing behavior, and all of that stuff, not their exact voices, just the way they were talking. And we have put it into the same text-to-speech synthesis. So it was the same machine talking, but in basically two different ways. Once in the way Steve Jobs would talk, once in the way Mark Zuckerberg would talk. And we have put this into a car navigation system and gave Danish locals, this is the city of Sønderborg. And we gave them the task to make a test drive with the system, because we have given them the kind of pretext that SDU engineers have developed something like a new car navigation system that can also be implemented into those cars that have no LCD and that only works with voice commands. This was our pretext, basically. And we asked them to make a test drive with the system. And this was the starting point, the little harbor of Sønderborg, and they had to go this road to the campus of the SDU. Or basically, we've only told them, you are starting here and you're going there. This is basically all we told them. And what they did not know is that at about half of the kind of road, the system started to give the wrong instructions. And they get worse and worse and worse in 4 different escalation steps, let's say. And this here, you still have a lot of roads going back to SDU. Escalation level 2, you have only 2 main roads leading back to SDU, and the detour is substantial. And level 3, only this road leads you back to SDU, and here you basically have to make a U-turn and go back, because there is basically no way to get back to SDU anymore. And basically stopping the test drive could be both. I actually stop the car and ask, what should I do? There's something wrong. Or you basically go your own way and ignore the system. Both would be stopping of the test drive. And what we found is that with Steve Jobs' way of talking, 26.7% of all drivers did not stop the test drive. They basically went on and on and on. following the system's instructions. If you take Mark Zuckerberg's way of talking, about 20% of the drivers already stopped at the very first level of escalation. So there's a significant difference in charismatic impact, even if we basically put our knowledge into machines, the effect of a charismatic voice is still there. And when we ask people, why did you do this? In the Steve Jobs condition, most people said, maybe there was an intended detour, maybe there was a road blockage, or there was a traffic jam, and the system tried to get me around it, and so I've trusted the system and followed the detour. In the case of Mark Zuckerberg, most people thought, crap, this system has been badly programmed, it doesn't work, I better do my own thing. So this was the difference if you put these two things into the machine. And there are also other examples that this one is a study based on artificial intelligence. So if you let an AI learn the outcomes of sales conversations, like this one here, she's selling cosmetics to her. And these researchers have had many, many conversations like these and have looked into, can I train, or can I, basically train to predict the outcome of such conversations. And the A stands for acoustics, and the L stands for the linguistics, which is basically the text. What have people said with their words? What we can see is that yes, both do make a contribution, but the one from the voice acoustics is bigger than the one from just the words. And it is the acoustics of both the customer and the client that actually matters here. And it comes out very, very similar across many studies. If it's about the success of debaters in swaying votes, if it's about persuasiveness rating prediction, public speaker assessment prediction, very often it is the voice that outperforms both the video, which means body language basically, and the text. But of course, sometimes it is also the video that outperforms the voice, but it's never the winner is the text, what you say. It's basically always the kind of non-verbal cues, what you are doing with your body, what you are doing with your voice. The text comes after that. So, this is a little wordplay. What is meant is AI wants to have leadership, okay? This is my last part here, and I want to give you a bit of food for thought about how we can think about this and what are the obstacles that we have to overcome. Can AI basically learn to speak charismatically? I think yes, of course it can, but we have to overcome some obstacles first. What you see here is actually data from our corpus, from our AllGoodSpeakers corpus. These are the kind of charisma scores of the subset of the German male and female population in our data set. As you can see, there's a bit of a bimodal distribution here. I don't want to go into this too deeply, but if you want to train an artificial intelligence to speak charismatically, what you want are these people here. And this is really only few data points. If you talk about the best 20%, you have, or let's say, scores with higher than 80, you basically have only 7% of these speakers in a database. If you talk about the top speakers, you have about 2.5% of the people who are performing at this level of excellence. So I'm not an AI engineer, but I know that what I need is data, a lot of data. And if this is what we are, what we basically want to have, then we obviously we've got a bottleneck that we actually need to overcome. So we want to specifically find these people to then train the AI. And the problem here is that it seems that what works for text doesn't work for voice. There's one paper in the from the Academy of Management Journal where in 2018 people have tried to see whether there is a link between verbal charismatic leadership tactics like something like metaphors, contrasts and stuff, and the number of views of certain TEDx videos and the number of retweets. In those days it was still Twitter, of retweets of certain little text entries. And yes, there was a significant correlation between these things. The thing is, if you go from text to voice, it doesn't seem to work in the same way. So we cannot simply go to TEDx talks or go to something like YouTube influencers, take those with the most views, with the most likes, and then create our charismatic database for AI to learn charismatic speaking. It doesn't seem to work in the same way. You would probably need something like a database that we have, or at least you need something like a screening mechanism by which you can find the most charismatic speakers in basically any database you want. But you cannot simply go to YouTube and download all of the stuff. You will not get just the most charismatic people in that way. And another example, and also the last example that I'm presenting to you, what we have done just about 2 months ago, so this is actually still warm and a bit of fresh data. What we have done is we have done a cloning of voices, a deep fake of voices of 10 female speakers, all kind of actors and celebrities, and 10 male speakers. We have cloned their voices, and we have, in both cases, a perception test where people had to rate the charisma of these speakers in a way that they cannot identify the speakers. Okay, they can identify the charisma in the voices, but not the speaker identity themselves. So we have now the 2 originals, and we have the 2 × 20 deepfake cloned voices. And what comes out is actually this. I have to get you a bit through this slide deck. We have here the percentage of change from the charisma score after cloning. So that means if you are highly positive, it means that you are now much better in the cloned voice than in the original voice. If you are in the negative realm, it means that you are getting worse than in your original performance. And this is the original charisma score. So what we can see is basically what a deepfake cloned voice makes with AI is that it makes the good speakers worse and the bad speakers better. So the bad speakers are all up here, and the good speakers are all down here. Basically, it's a bit like an equalizer. Basically, everybody comes out approximately average if you are cloning a voice. This is the kind of result. Everybody sounds more or less about something like mainstream charismatic. So, a brief to wrap up. What are or basically, how does innovation drive inspiration? First, acoustic voice profiling technology can help trainers to manage one aspect of the digital communication and rhetoric better. Second, charismatic speech can enhance a company's or country's innovation power by, for example, making people work harder and more effective, reduce the number of sickness days and conflicts at workplaces, but also by generating better ideas and creativity workshops and by facilitating ideas that are basically being viewed and shared. Third, vocal performances in particular are an extremely powerful and informative human biosignal. If you want to take one thing home, then please don't underestimate the voice when you are speaking. There's basically so much information from stress to emotions to attitudes to basically everything, your gender, your age, your health condition, all these things are contained in your voices. And it helps people, basically helps to get the good ideas funded and supported in a global competition. And number 4, talking machines like voice assistants and virtual avatars are one of the greatest inventions, yes, but teaching a machine to speak charismatically isn't an easy task, and we need to invest a bit into that to make it happen, I think. Thanks a lot. Also, thanks to Vered again.
Are there questions in the audience? If not, I will begin with my own. Something like more juicy facts about leaders, real leaders, like who is more charismatic, Obama, or I know in your papers or others, they checked Obama, they checked Jeff Kennedy, Nixon. Mm-hmm. We did with Gantz and Bibi as well. Mm-hmm. Can you remember some?
Yes. Points? What was the question now?
So the question is, who is more charismatic in terms of real leaders that you checked?
Okay.
Who is the best? Who is?
Well. This is, of course, a tough question because sometimes the best speakers are not the most popular ones, so they are also a bit hidden. Charismatic skills, of course, can help you climb the ladder, but of course, it is not the only one, it is not the only skill. We see, for example, in these days, there is one quite popular car maker and CEO of an e-car company who is not the best speaker in the world. And very often this becomes clear when you are in a crisis situation. Then it is especially important to actually have charismatic speaking skills to get followers and to keep everybody around you following you. This is something I think. But of course, yeah, I mean, in terms of our scoring system, the former US President Barack Obama was a very, very charismatic speaker. And also you have talked about
Bibi and Gantz?
Yes, and also the Nixon-Kennedy comparison. There was this kind of thing that actually Nixon has won on the radio and Kennedy and the TV, if I remember correctly. And actually our system made the same thing. So if you just listen to the person, then this voice was indeed the stronger one. So if it is just on the radio, you would say, he actually is the better performer here. But if you see it on TV, then it was basically vice versa. And what I think is an important leader skill also, voice-wise, we've basically had this on one of the slides when we come to the Bibi and Gantz comparison, is that you need to be adaptable, let's say. We have seen the kind of different recommendations of you should be higher pitch, you should be lower pitch, faster and slower. And the good people actually can control and adjust these things because they are, they do make a difference. For example, if you are talking faster, you basically put the spotlight onto the emotion. So basically, people will remember you as being the emotional speaker, but they basically forget about your content. If you are slowing down in your speech, you can put the focus on your content and basically sacrifice part of the kind of emotional aspect of your speech. And what good speakers do is that they switch back and forth depending on the situation, depending on the context.
And this is what Bibi did,
exactly.
According to our research,
exactly,
right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. What we have developed and what we are doing more kind of research for is for the situation where one person talks to many persons, or basically one person talks, period. Yes, so it also works for something like call center agents, obviously, but it does not work in the same way for negotiations, for dialogues. It is a different thing, and we have only tapped into this area. But we know that there are different rules and things that are in place.
Yes, please.
Thank you for the lecture, but what do you think of that?
You need probably a better AI engineer to answer that question. I think, from my experience, also in terms of how we have deep-faked the voices, something like a real-time AI improvement is difficult to do. So that, something that comes across as being still something like lips synchronous. I don't think that this is working, but of course you can record a speech and you can play it back in a deep fake alternative that if you are a bad speaker, it can, as we've seen, it can actually make you better. About something like real-time applications, I assume that it is not possible to do that because of the time delay that it takes. But for example, what currently is already used in call center agencies is that they put acoustic filters in between the microphone and the telephone that change your spectral acoustics in a way that that you sound, acoustically speaking, taller. So these filters basically increase your acoustically projected body size because taller people are more trustworthy, are more authoritative. So you're basically more likely to buy stuff from people who sound taller on the phone. Therefore, these kind of filters are there, and they can be used in real time. About something like a deepfake voice, I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, well, in a way, yes. We are currently in a project with a big German car manufacturer, whose name I should not say, but and we are in a project now that the car comes with something like 100 or more different voices, and when you basically buy the car, you are talking into the car, and the car analyzes your own voice and finds the voice that is most attractive for you, for the car to speak. So basically, the car selects the voice based on your own voice, so that is the most trustworthy, most attractive partner on the road. This is something that, of course, can be done. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all about perception. Yes, people feel that it actually, people feel the kind of driving experience is perceived better. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Oliver.
Of course.